You cheated on me while I was on a business trip, didn't you? We're getting a divorce. Give the house to my parents and leave right now. Jackson's voice boomed through the phone, a storm of accusation and anger. But I wasn't taken aback. I knew he was grasping at straws, trying to find a reason to blame me for his own failings. I already sold it, I replied coolly, feeling his emotions teeter on the other end. He thought he could outwit me, but he underestimated my intuition. I simmered with fury initially, but his feeble attempt at deception only made me smirk. It was my turn now. This is the tale of how my deceitful husband tried to manipulate me and how I outmaneuvered him. My name is Olivia, a 28-year-old working mom. I've been at the college store job since I graduated from junior college at 20. Jackson, 2 years my senior, now toils away in an office at a construction firm. But when we first crossed paths 3 years ago, he was adrift, jobless. He'd abandoned his first post-college job, claiming it wasn't right for him. Since then, he drifted between gigs, often idling. That's when he swept me off my feet, proposing in mere months. Okay, but there's a condition, I stated firmly, noting the worry etched on Jackson's face. What is it? He asked, apprehension creeping into his voice. You need to find a stable job. Otherwise, marriage is out of the question. We need to think about our future, I explained, my tone resolute. Oh, come on. Of course, but you're working, so there's no rush, right? Jackson attempted to brush off the seriousness of the situation. My parents would worry if I married a man without a job. Find one before we get married, I insisted, my gaze unwavering. Seeing my stern expression, Jackson sighed in resignation. All right, I'll find one. Then you'll marry me. Yes, and so it'll be, I affirmed, though uncertainty lingered in my mind. Reluctantly, Jackson embarked on his job hunt, eventually securing a position in an office at a construction company. We tied the knot. Back then, I viewed Jackson as somewhat careless about money and work. He'd quit jobs impulsively and didn't always grasp the gravity of financial matters, even in the context of marriage. Yet he was receptive when I spoke seriously. I believed that after marriage, I could guide him, fill in his gaps, and in turn, he would complement my weaknesses. Together, we'd form a strong partnership. But life proved to be more complicated than I anticipated. Jackson's apparent disregard for financial matters appeared to be a trait passed down from his parents. Around a year into our marriage, during our search for a house and discussions about securing a mortgage, Jackson dropped a bombshell. I might not be able to get a loan, he disclosed casually, leaving me stunned. What? I exclaimed, seeking clarification. Nonchalantly, he explained, I looked into it, and because I hadn't been at my job for long, I might need a guarantor for the loan. The only person I could ask is my dad, but he's dealing with significant gambling debts, so he probably can't be a guarantor. His revelation left me dumbfounded, especially with the contract and the real estate agent right in front of us. Yet Jackson seemed unfazed. If we put the house in your name, it'll be fine, right? You've been at your job forever, so you can get the loan. We'll both pay it off. It's just a formality, he suggested casually. That's not the point. Why didn't you discuss this with me? This is a big deal for me too. I'm not even prepared with the paperwork, I retorted, frustration bubbling within me. Though he apologized, his contrition felt hollow, lacking sincerity. Despite my urge to argue, I refrained from escalating the situation, considering the already prepared contract and the presence of the agent. Reluctantly, I hastily gathered the necessary documents, such as my income statement, for the loan application. In a spur-of-the-moment decision, I impulsively bought the house under my name. As I hurried to finalize the paperwork, a wave of anxiety washed over me. Could I truly envision a future with this man? Perhaps I should have simply put a halt to the proceedings instead of rushing to prepare the documents. Adding to my mounting anxiety was the looming issue with my in-laws. The other day, I had a talk with Dad. Jackson began one evening. He mentioned that he might lose the house due to the debts I mentioned earlier. He's considering moving in with us. That's all right, isn't it? What? Why would you even consider that? I responded sharply, hoping to convey the seriousness of the situation, but Jackson seemed unfazed. Well, he's in a tough spot. My brother is single, but he's working overseas. I'm Dad's only option. Shouldn't we discuss this properly? Maybe he can stay with us temporarily until he finds another place, but committing to having him live with us permanently is a major decision, Jackson reasoned, his expression troubled. You're just trying to avoid the issue. If he stays, we can split the living expenses. You're always complaining about money, he countered. You mean the money you never contribute? You promised we'd split the mortgage, but it's only coming out of my paycheck. You haven't paid your share. In marriage, finances are shared. It's not just your money, it's ours. It's only deducted from your account because the house is in your name. Stop being so self-centered, I admonished, frustration simmering beneath my words. My frustration boiled over, and I raised my voice, demanding answers. Jackson's response was simply, I hate talking about money, before abruptly leaving the room. These clashes became all too common, with Jackson consistently brushing off my concerns and retreating, leaving issues unresolved. Yet despite his aversion to discussing finances, Jackson wasn't entirely idle when it came to his family's predicaments. His role in construction site administration brought him into frequent contact with real estate contracts, leading him to consult a specific agency about the potential sale of his family home and the steps involved in securing the best deal. I've been considering selling the house for a good price, but I'm unsure about the process. What steps should I take if I decide to sell down the line? This topic was a recurring theme in our conversations. It was somewhat reassuring to know that I wasn't alone in contemplating these matters. However, the persistent notion of his family living with us post-sale always lingered in the back of my mind, causing unease. Jackson started holding meetings with real estate agencies and my parents-in-law behind my back, and his weekends away from home became more frequent. Eventually, he had to embark on a business trip that would keep him away for several months. The project required him to stay near the construction site until its completion. At the time, I didn't realize it, but the power struggle between us had already commenced. A few days after Jackson's departure, I decided to treat myself to tea after a shopping trip. As I entered the cafe, I was greeted by a familiar face. Recollecting past encounters, I recognized him as someone Jackson had once brought home. He worked at a real estate company, and Jackson had mentioned him as Samuel, a young employee who was relatively new to the company with less than a year under his belt. Oh, hello. You've been to our house before, right? I greeted him with a hint of recognition. Yes, I apologize for dropping by unannounced and even staying for a meal. My apologies, Samuel replied sheepishly. No worries. I should have been more hospitable, I assured him, gesturing for us to sit down and have tea together. Samuel proved to be very friendly and surprisingly sensible, especially considering his youth. We engaged in pleasant conversation over tea before parting ways. At that moment, I could have fathomed what would follow. Little did I know, this seemingly innocuous encounter would later be twisted into an accusation of infidelity. It happened when Jackson confronted me. You cheated on me while I was away, didn't you? We're getting a divorce. Give the house to my parents and leave now. His words hit me like a bolt of lightning. The first thought that crossed my mind was disbelief. Could it be true? Had Jackson spread rumors about me cheating, all to justify a divorce? The shocking revelation came from an unexpected source. Samuel, the very man Jackson falsely accused me of having an affair with. The day after our tea, Samuel showed up at my doorstep unannounced. I apologized for the sudden visit. About yesterday, Jackson asked me to get close to you, he confessed, his words catching me off guard. Shocked and confused, I invited him inside and listened intently as he unraveled his tale. Jackson had orchestrated a deceitful plan to frame me for cheating in order to expedite a divorce. He had enlisted Samuel to manufacture evidence against me. There were two underlying motives behind Jackson's scheme. Firstly, he coveted our house and sought to wrest it from my possession. Concerned about his parents' property, he believed it would be simpler to reside there with them. However, my objection to the arrangement thwarted his plan, leading him to concoct a scheme to evict me and claim the house for himself. Secondly, Jackson was engaged in an extramarital affair. Under the guise of discussing matters with my parents-in-law, he spent weekends with his mistress. Consumed by his infatuation, he viewed me, his wife, as an impediment to his happiness. By framing me for infidelity, he aimed to secure financial compensation in the divorce settlement. I always underestimated Jackson's intelligence, but he certainly proved to be cunning in the worst ways. Despicable, I muttered under my breath, my disdain evident. Samuel offered his apologies, but I had no intention of aiding Jackson in his deceitful scheme. I refused to be manipulated for such nefarious purposes. Thus, I feigned cooperation while secretly plotting to outmaneuver him. Taking advantage of Samuel's real estate expertise, I listened as he provided various suggestions. Eventually, he proposed a bold idea. You should sell the house while Jackson is away on his trip. When I finally uttered the words, I sold it, Jackson's reaction was a mixture of confusion and disbelief. What? He managed to sputter, clearly at a loss for words. Seeing his stunned expression, I resolved to twist the knife further. I recounted everything I learned from Samuel, including the recordings he provided. You were attempting to fabricate evidence to make it appear as though I was having an affair with him. If we divorce now, I can pursue alimony and court proceedings, I explained calmly, watching Jackson's bewildered expression as he repeated, Why? Why? But I had another revelation to share. You might not have realized, but Samuel isn't just an ordinary employee. He's actually the son of the company's CEO. Jackson's shock was palpable. What? How could I have missed that? He exclaimed, his confusion deepening. It was clear he had underestimated the gravity of the situation. Do you not realize that Samuel shares the same last name as the CEO? How could you overlook that? I questioned, incredulous at his obliviousness. Well, Samuel's last name isn't exactly rare. Jackson attempted to defend himself weakly. Wait, are you serious? He added, his incredulity growing. No, I'm serious, I asserted firmly, noting the shock in Jackson's expression. Samuel's company held significant importance to Jackson as one of his key clients. Additionally, they had provided crucial assistance with his family home matters. If news of his deceit reached the company's boss, Jackson would undoubtedly find himself in serious trouble. As it turned out, Samuel had already reported the situation. Hey, come on. All right, I'll look into it. If you're lying, I'll find out soon enough, Jackson responded before abruptly ending the call. It didn't take long for him to realize the gravity of the situation and the irreversible damage he had caused. Subsequently, the real estate company owned by Samuel's father refused to engage in any business dealings with Jackson or offer him advice regarding his family home. With no other options, Jackson was forced to return to his family home after concluding his business trip. Meanwhile, since I had sold my house, Samuel had graciously introduced me to an affordable apartment, leaving me with no concerns. As I initiated the divorce proceedings, Jackson persistently reached out, pleading for forgiveness. I'm sorry, Olivia. Please forgive me, he implored. It's too late now. You attempted to manipulate someone into trapping me. Why should I believe anything you say? I retorted, my resolve unyielding. Don't say that. Once we're divorced, you can marry that other woman, right? That's what you wanted, isn't it? I questioned, hoping to reaffirm his intentions. Yes, but she apparently had someone else she liked and dumped me. What a pathetic story, Jackson admitted with a hint of bitterness. Even if that's the case, don't expect me to welcome you back with open arms, I responded firmly, my patience wearing thin. With a sigh, I ended the call. Despite my efforts to keep my current address undisclosed, Jackson's relentless barrage of calls persisted. Each time, he'd plead, Don't leave me. Help me, I'll be a good husband, his promises ringing hollow in my ears. I grew increasingly exasperated with his empty pleas. Once the divorce was finalized, I resolved to sever all ties, deleting his number, blocking him on WhatsApp, and cutting off communication entirely. Yet, the unwelcome appeals didn't end with Jackson. Even my mother-in-law reached out, begging, Please, Olivia. We'll be lost without you. It's not the house we wanted. It's you, isn't it? But there's no house left, I pointed out, feeling a mix of frustration and disbelief. We didn't just desire the house. We're not that heartless. Come back, and you'll understand, she urged, her tone pleading. You were after the money, weren't you? I accused, feeling the surge of resentment. That's not true. You're being unfair. You tried to pressure me into living with you, and when I refused, Jackson attempted to manipulate me to gain an advantage in the divorce, she countered defensively. I can't trust someone like that. It's evident that your motives revolve around money, I asserted firmly, refusing to yield to Jackson's pleas. As I continued to reject his advances, my father-in-law dialed my number, his tone dripping with arrogance. Isn't it your duty as a daughter-in-law to show some respect to my wife? Are you seriously saying no? Isn't this all because of the debt you accumulated? He demanded, his voice growing increasingly strident. With each word, his accusations stung, and when I responded with equal resolve, his tone turned venomous. You heartless woman, abandoning your mother-in-law in her time of need and shifting blame onto her. I'll make you pay for your cruelty. He bellowed into the phone, the volume causing my ears to ring. Unable to tolerate his threats any longer, I abruptly ended the call and, clutching the recorded audio as evidence, sought counsel from my lawyer. It transpired that my father-in-law's menacing words could be construed as a threat. Armed with this knowledge, I informed Jackson that I would pursue legal action if he refused to consent to the divorce. In a state of panic, Jackson reluctantly agreed to the divorce, allowing me to sever ties with his tumultuous family once and for all. With the legal proceedings finalized, I found solace in the newfound freedom from their oppressive influence. However, the consequences of his actions soon caught up with Jackson. His reputation at work suffered, resulting in diminished responsibilities and a significant loss of trust from his superiors. Furthermore, the unresolved debt issue forced him to sell his family home at a depreciated value, leaving him and his parents to reside in a modest apartment. With his reduced role at work, Jackson's income dwindled, compounded by the financial strain of providing support to his dependent parents. The burden of alimony payments only exacerbated his financial woes. These unfortunate circumstances came to my attention through Samuel, who remained confident despite the tumultuous events. It was through Samuel's suggestion that I found a potential opportunity to leverage my customer service skills from my previous job at a clothing store. He proposed a position in his company's HR department, offering a chance for me to rebuild my life on my own terms. After discovering an opening that required strong communication skills, I deliberated extensively and sought advice before ultimately accepting the position at the real estate company. This decision marked a significant shift in my career path. Throughout this transition, Samuel and I maintained our close bond, which gradually blossomed into a romantic relationship. A year into our courtship, we exchanged vows and embarked on our journey as husband and wife, with me assuming the role of the future company president's spouse. The irony wasn't lost on me. The two individuals Jackson attempted to portray as entangled in an affair had ultimately found love and married each other. As I integrated into my new family, which included my in-laws, I was met with warmth and acceptance. Together with Samuel, I envisioned crafting a fulfilling and harmonious life, building upon the foundation of our shared love and mutual respect.
Just file for divorce. I don't want the kids. With those harsh words, my husband left the house, abandoning our 3-year-old twins and our newborn daughter. I had suspected he was cheating for some time, but between childcare and work, I had no energy to confront him. I can't do this anymore. Just then, one of the twins clung to me, saying, "Mommy, we love you." Their worried faces looked up at me. Despite my anger towards my husband, something snapped in me at that moment. Well, I'll just file it, I thought. I signed the divorce papers with a smirk. He doesn't realize how much I've been supporting him. Unknowingly, he had begun his descent into hell. I'll be home late again. How many times have I heard that? My name is Iris. I'm 34. We got married 4 years ago. He was 2 years younger, which led me to spoil him at first. The following year, we had twin girls, and 3 years later, another daughter. His return home began to get extremely late around the time our last child was born. I hope the third one is a boy. I've always dreamed of playing catch with him. He was excited during the pregnancy, but his attitude soured as soon as he found out it was another girl. At the hospital, he grimaced upon seeing our newborn daughter. "She doesn't look like me. She's not cute." Intense anger welled up inside me. How can you say your own child isn't cute? Maybe he was already considering divorce by then. Even after I came home from the hospital, his sulkiness continued. He barely helped with childcare. Show a little interest in the kids. If you're short on hands, hire a babysitter or something. You've got savings from your job. I worked at a top-tier company, earning significantly more than most women my age. On the other hand, my husband struggled to keep a job, often quitting before I even noticed. Perhaps he was envious that I was more successful at work. At the time, he was also doing temporary work, unsure of how long it would last. I didn't expect any financial support from him, but I wished he'd at least fulfill his role as a father. Spend some time with the kids at night, at least. What a hassle. When I asked him to help, he did it reluctantly and so poorly that the girls were bored. He realized they weren't warming up to him, which he didn't like. leading to a terrible cycle. Eventually, he stopped helping with the kids altogether. "I'm tired from work. Let me rest on the weekends," he said. On weekends, he either stayed in his room or went out with someone. "I have to work this holiday. If you don't watch the kids, I have plans too. See you." My husband left without listening to me. I couldn't leave the children alone, so I often had to find a babysitter at the last minute. If this continued, it would surely destroy our marriage and harm our children. Thinking this, I decided to talk to my in-laws the next day. That's just how husbands are. A wife needs to be patient. More importantly, could you do that thing we talked about last time? My visit to my in-laws ended with them ignoring my concerns and asking for favors. My parents live far away, so it's hard to visit them. I feel guilty even calling, not knowing who to turn to. "Hey, make dinner." When I returned home in the evening, I was greeted by my husband in pajamas and a messy house. The kids, bored with their toys, instantly smiled upon seeing me. "Where have you been all this time?" "I had to stop by the in-laws for a bit." "Hurry up and make dinner. I'm starving." "If you've been home all day, couldn't you do some laundry or clean the bath?" Hearing this, my husband snorted in amusement. I decided not to do anything for someone who doesn't show gratitude. "What do you mean? I cleaned the bath yesterday, and you didn't thank me." "Didn't I say thank you?" "Not that. I mean, like, at least $100. He stretched out his hand, gesturing for money. What is he talking about? I must have looked distant, tired, and irritated. I pulled him aside to the bathroom so the kids wouldn't hear and retorted, "I am working, doing the chores, raising the kids, everything, and you have never thanked me." "That's a wife's job." "Then what's your job?" "I work too." He barely earns $1,000 a month and does nothing around the house. Our argument lasted about an hour until, "Mommy, I'm hungry." My daughter's call snapped me out of it. My husband left in a huff, but I ignored him and rushed to prepare dinner. During these tense days, I discovered something: my husband is cheating. I confided in a college colleague who had divorced due to her husband's affairs, and she advised me to gather evidence immediately. To tell the truth, I had noticed my husband's affair some time ago, just before our youngest was born. I noticed a sweet fragrance on him, like perfume. When I casually asked him about it just after he got home, he broke into a sweat and started stuttering. In addition to that, he was coming home very late, talking less and less, and his attitude towards the children was changing. There were many signs, including the disappearance of intimacy, but what really convinced me was a certain event. "There was a lipstick in the pocket of your jacket." "It's mine. My lips get chapped." "You're using Chanel's pink lipstick?" "Maybe it's my mom's." His evasive answer sounded like a lie. Then, as he hurriedly said, "I need a bath," and stripped off his dress shirt on the way to the bathroom, I saw it. "What is that?" I sighed. It was clearly a hickey in a place usually covered by clothes. I was about to confront him but immediately thought better of it and decided to gather evidence first. "Take your time warming up," I smiled sweetly, pretending I hadn't seen anything. The next day, I came home late from overtime. My daughters were already asleep, and the room was wrecked in silence. "We need to talk." Only the dining room light was on, and there he stood, holding a piece of paper. "I can't take this anymore. Let's get a divorce." "What?" "Just file for divorce. I don't want the kids." Without waiting for my response, he handed me the divorce papers and left. "Mommy." The sound of the door closing woke up the twins, who looked at me worriedly. "It's okay. Sorry for waking you." Though I told my daughters it was okay, it clearly wasn't. He's reached his limit? That's my line. And what does he mean he doesn't want the kids? Mixed emotions swirled in my head, and I hadn't even noticed the tears streaming down my face. "Mommy, we love you." Sensing something, the girls hugged me tightly. At that moment, I came to my senses. I can't go on like this. I can't worry these little girls. I realized that as long as I have my children, I'm happy, and this is what I should have done from the start. "Well, I'll just file it." When I said this with a determined look on my face, my daughters smiled, and we all slept soundly that night. The next day, I filed the divorce papers first thing in the morning and called a certain person. "Yes, please go ahead with it." It's my husband who will have trouble. The person on the phone listened to my story and took action. This was something I had considered before. If my husband betrayed me, I would end everything we had been doing. If that ruins his life, it's none of my business. 3 days later. Iris, where have you been? Waiting for me as I returned from work were my in-laws and my husband. My mother-in-law was furious, my father-in-law pale, and my husband seemed clueless, dragged along without understanding the situation. Have you been waiting at the front door all this time? That's kind of creepy. This is no time for that. What is this? My mother-in-law thrust a letter at me. It's a notice from a lawyer. I can see that much. Her face was tomato red as she raised her voice. I need to pick up my daughters, so excuse me. Ignoring them, I went inside, but my furious in-laws followed me into the living room, insisting on a discussion. Why would you suddenly send this? I don't understand. You would understand if you read the letter, wouldn't you? Using a lawyer, how cowardly. Despite being in the wrong, my MIL's outrage was something else, mixed with irritation and confusion. I was constantly thinking about how to convey my feelings. Then my husband, who seemed to understand nothing, finally spoke up. Are you upset because I divorced you? Filing some kind of complaint? My in-laws looked at him, dumbfounded. Of course, he had no idea what I had done for them all this time. Hey, I didn't hear about any divorce. Is that why this is happening? Such a useless son. What are you two so anxious for? You've ruined everything. Wait, what are we even talking about? As the conversation between them went nowhere, I watched coldly as my MIL slammed the table. Why did you divorce, Iris? Well, my husband clammed up when things got uncomfortable. Since the conversation wasn't going anywhere, I decided to answer for him. He completely failed to fulfill his duties as a husband and father. There you go again. I told you that's just how men are, right? So you would forgive your husband if he had an affair? What? My MIL froze, clearly not expecting to hear that her son had been unfaithful. My husband tried to interject, but a sharp glare from me shut him up. Then, oddly, my FIL started defending his son. A man's affair is just a fling. It's not a problem. This is pointless. Please leave. All further communication will need to go through my lawyer. So what are you talking to a lawyer for now? You're agreeing to the divorce, right? My husband was confused, clueless about what was going on. Agreeing? I filed for divorce straight away. Then what is all this about? While arguing with my husband, my MIL suddenly started crying loudly. Paying $56,000 in one lump sum is impossible. What large sum? What are you talking about? Who's paying whom? Finally, the moment had come, time for my husband to regret. I proudly revealed what I had kept hidden until now. It was right after we got married 4 years ago. I was called to my in-laws' house alone, where my MIL said she had a serious matter to discuss. Nervous just because she was his mother, I was prepared to help however I could, but the words that came out of her mouth were shocking. I need $60,000, she said out of the blue, leaving me utterly confused. As I hesitated, she bluntly asked about my salary. Unable to withstand her pressure, I admitted it was over $100,000, and her eyes lit up. Apparently, my FIL had gotten into horse racing, losing big amounts without ever winning, and had even accumulated debt. Desperate for $60,000 to cover his debts, she pleaded with me, and I couldn't say no, repeatedly insisting she would pay me back. 4 years passed, and all I got back was just $4,000. There were times when she repaid some only to borrow again. If I don't do something, I will never be able to collect the full amount. So I hired a lawyer and filed a lump sum claim for the remaining $56,000 in full. My husband's jaw dropped when he heard this, and I almost laughed. But we said we'd pay back little by little. Why suddenly in full? We're no longer family, so I thought I shouldn't hold back. Then my MIL, with a screech like a monkey, turned her fury towards my husband. It's your fault for cheating, so you should be the one to pay it back. Huh? Why should I? We're not working anymore, and our pension won't cover it. If you want me to live in your parents' house, you'll do what I say. There was no way he could pay back $56,000 in one lump sum, especially since he was unemployed again at the time. I'll live at Kate's place, so I won't pay. That's the name of your affair partner. As I grew increasingly absurd listening to this family quarrel, I decided it was time to deliver the final blow. Don't think it ends with $56,000. I'm demanding $20,000 each from you and your affair partner as compensation, plus child support, of course. What? It's only fair. Leaving your children to play around? Where's the proof I cheated? Had he forgotten so quickly about loudly declaring he'd live with Kate? Sighing, I handed him a pile of photos I had prepared for this moment. Looking at these made me sick. The photos were from his social media, showing him kissing and embracing his affair partner. Definitely a no-no, as confirmed by my lawyer. Why do you have these? A quick online search brought up your social media. It's amazing you thought it wouldn't be found. My naive husband had kept posting cheerful photos in a public setting. He probably continued to use social networking sites without knowing how horrible they were. I was surprised that he was doing this, being mechanically inept. But it made it easy for me to gather evidence of his cheating. Even my in-laws were dumbfounded, gaping at him. Please leave now. It's time to go to daycare. At least don't demand compensation from Kate. What if she runs away? That's not my problem. With no resolution in sight, I forcefully kicked the family out. Open this. Help me. I didn't know about the debt. I could hear my husband yelling through the door for a while. I'm calling the police, I yelled, and the three of them shrugged and left. A year has passed since then. After paying me the compensation, the affair partner disappeared. Because of this, my ex-husband had to live at his parents' home, where they incessantly demanded he cover the $56,000. He ended up borrowing from shady lenders. While he managed to pay that off quickly, he still owes $20,000 in compensation for the affair and $500 a month in child support. Now he earns his daily wage by doing manual labor from morning to night. The interest on his debt is ballooning, and it might be impossible for him to pay it off in his lifetime. But that's none of my business. Mommy, we're going to be late. Oops, my daughters are calling me to daycare. They're growing up so healthy and strong. That's all the happiness I need.
Protecting your daughter is our priority. One afternoon, a sudden call from the police jolted me. Why would they be calling me? What on earth happened? As I listened, shock coursed through me at their words. What do you mean? It turned out they had found my 4-year-old daughter alone and had taken her into their care. But she was supposed to be at the amusement park with my husband. Little did I know, this call would mark a significant turning point in our lives. I'm Karen, 30 years old, juggling work from home while raising my daughter. 5 years ago, I married my college classmate Andrew, and together we have a 4-year-old daughter named Jennifer. My husband is incredibly hands-on with childcare, often taking our daughter out on his days off. He's also on the cusp of a big promotion, so life has been quite rosy for us, thanks to him and our delightful daughter. That was until I received that fateful call. Today, we're going to the amusement park, Jennifer had exclaimed with excitement that Saturday. My husband, off work, had taken her, though I was meant to join. A last-minute work task foiled my plans. We're off. Have a great time, I called after them, watching as they held hands and headed to the car. All right, time to nail work today. It's going to be a good day, I murmured to myself as I retreated to my home office. 2 hours later, as I was about to take a short break, I noticed my phone ringing. Since it was lunchtime, I'd assumed it was my husband. However, the caller ID displayed an unknown number, leaving me on edge. Answering cautiously, I was greeted by the police, informing me they had found my daughter alone. But there was no way she'd be alone. She was supposed to be at the amusement park with my husband. Initially, I thought it was a prank. I decided to double-check with my husband. Hello, there's something I'd like to ask you, I began. What's up? He replied casually. Where are you and Jennifer right now? I inquired, my concern growing. We're at the amusement park, my husband answered, still nonchalant. My heart raced as I struggled to process his words. The police just called me, saying they found Jennifer. What's going on? What? Well, she's laughing next to me, he replied, sounding slightly unsettled. As long as you're together, that's fine, I said, trying to reassure myself. Can you put Jennifer on? No, she says she's too embarrassed, my husband responded. But she loves playing phone games and calling us when we're out. There's no way she'd be embarrassed, I countered, feeling my trust in my husband waver. Are you sure? It sounds like something Jennifer would do. Look, maybe Jennifer is tired too. Can we drop it now? My husband's eagerness to end the conversation only fueled my suspicion. Suddenly, I noticed something off. Wait, it's unusually quiet. There's no sound of laughter or amusement park rides in the background. I pointed out, my apprehension deepening. He claims they're at the amusement park, but could that be true? I'll see you at home then, I said, unable to shake the feeling of unease. With that, he hung up. As I pondered my husband's odd behavior and the unsettling silence, a nagging sense that something wasn't right consumed me. I realized I hadn't checked the GPS on my daughter's phone amidst the chaos of the police call. But it shows they're at the amusement park, I murmured to myself, surprised by the confirmation. The GPS confirmed they were indeed where they were supposed to be. However, the call from the police still left me uneasy. Worried yet suspicious, I decided to head to the amusement park. When I arrived at the Lost and Found Center, there she was, my daughter, chatting happily with a police officer. But as soon as she spotted me, tears streamed down her face. Dad said he'd wait for me on a bench and that I could go on any ride I wanted. I was playing, and then when I looked around, he was nowhere to be found, she sobbed. Concern gnawed at me as I listened to her story. I asked the staff for details. They had found my daughter wandering alone in the park. Despite several announcements calling for her guardians, no one showed up, prompting them to contact the police. Thankfully, she had a tag with her address and my contact details, allowing them to reach me quickly. Where could he be? What's he doing? My husband wasn't the type to abandon our 4-year-old daughter like this. Could he be in some sort of trouble? I shook off the unsettling thoughts as I focused on comforting my daughter. Mom, I took lots of pictures, she said, handing me her toy camera, a special gift from her grandfather. Even though it's just a toy, it can take real photos. Curious, I turned it on and scrolled through the pictures. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered under my breath as I came across a photo of my husband hugging an unfamiliar woman. My heart sank as more similar photos appeared, making me feel sick to my stomach. Jennifer, who is this woman? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She's a friend of Dad's, Jennifer replied innocently, but her words felt like a punch to the gut. Dark memories flooded back. My husband had cheated on me once before, 5 years ago when I was pregnant. We had reconciled then because of our impending child, but now he was doing it again, and using our daughter to cover it up. He probably left her here to be with his mistress. Do you know where Dad went, Jennifer? I asked, my voice trembling. She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes as she recounted how he had forcefully pushed her away earlier, telling her she was big enough to play by herself. I'm so sorry you had to go through this, sweetie, I whispered, taking her hand as we headed home. Late that night, my husband rushed through the door, looking panicked. Where have you been, and what have you been doing? I demanded, my anger barely contained. He picked up on the tension in my voice, looking tense himself. Actually, Jennifer went missing, he stammered. You said she was fine on the phone. Why did you lie? I pressed. I didn't lie, he insisted, but his words rang hollow in the air. I never imagined it would take this long to find her. It's been over 6 hours since that phone call. He's probably been out with his mistress all this time. It's clear he's lying. Don't you think it's odd you didn't notice the park announcement? I confronted him. How do you know about that? He asked, looking uncomfortable. The police called me when I went to pick up Jennifer at the amusement park. The staff told me, I replied, watching his silence confirm my suspicions. He wasn't there, leaving our daughter stranded at an amusement park to be with his mistress. It's unforgivable. I've made up my mind to get back at him, I declared firmly. Fine, just don't do it again, he said, visibly relieved. Okay, I replied, deciding to let him think he's off the hook for now. Meanwhile, I've been up to something. A month later, I found myself in Los Angeles, not for vacation or work, but to catch my husband red-handed with his mistress. Having a good time on your trip with your mistress? I confronted them as they walked hand in hand. They both turned around, their faces filled with shock. You can't talk your way out of this, Karen. What are you doing here? Weren't you supposed to be on a business trip today? He stuttered. That's not it. She's a colleague from work, he tried to explain. Oh, really? I called your office. They confirmed you took the day off? I countered, watching him grow increasingly rattled, his eyes darting around as if seeking a way out of his own lie. How did you even find out I was here? he finally asked. Remember the GPS on Jennifer's phone? I put it in your car, I replied, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and betrayal. I showed him my phone screen, displaying the location of a car parked nearby. Using a hidden camera is so underhanded. Who's the underhanded one here? The only reason you'd be worried is if you had something to hide, I accused, my frustration evident. Or is this you finally admitting it? I continued, my voice trembling with anger. That's not it, he retorted, his fury palpable. He cheats and yet blames me, I thought, rendered momentarily speechless by his audacity. Do you even have proof that I cheated? He challenged, his tone dripping with disdain. Well, about that, I trailed off before shoving a photo in his face. What is this? Look familiar, I demanded, my voice rising. This is from when we went to the amusement park. But how do you have this picture? You were supposed to be working, he sputtered, his disbelief evident. Jennifer took it. Toy camera actually works, you know, I replied, my frustration mounting. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered, his expression shifting from disbelief to denial. This isn't even me, he insisted, attempting to dismiss the evidence. To counter his attempt to weasel out, I handed him a large number of photos. There were so many of them that they seemed to overflow from his hands. I'll admit the toy camera doesn't take the clearest photos, so I took these myself to make sure, I explained, watching his face pale as he saw the photos clearly showing him with his lover. How could you be all lovey-dovey with her right in front of our daughter? You're despicable, I accused, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and betrayal. In a desperate attempt to erase the evidence, he began tearing up the photos. But I had anticipated his move. Too bad these are all copies, I declared triumphantly, watching his face fall as the realization sank in. I've got the original stored safely, I declared, my anger palpable as I glared at him. He looked defeated, but I decided to deal another blow. You've got a big promotion coming up at work, don't you? I asked pointedly. What's your point? He replied, his voice strained. How do you think spreading these photos would affect that? I pressed. His face gradually turned paler as he realized the implications. His company values character when considering promotions. If word got out about the affair, it could ruin his chances. Please don't do this. Do you really think I'll forgive you now? I've been a good husband all this time, haven't I? He pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. A good husband wouldn't leave his daughter at an amusement park, I retorted loudly, watching him visibly shrink back. But I've been taking our daughter out every week lately, haven't I? He countered weakly. That was just to keep me off your scent about your affair, wasn't it? I shot back, my voice dripping with accusation. I'm really sorry. Just please don't tell my work, he begged, his almost tearful face failing to elicit any sympathy from me. Do you remember when you cheated on me 5 years ago while I was pregnant? I continued, watching his face tense and sweat form on his forehead. I haven't forgotten the agreement we signed. His eyes widened in realization. No, this isn't what it looks like. It's not an affair, he stammered, but his words fell flat. Then what is it? I demanded, my voice cold and unyielding. He fell silent, starting to cry, pathetic. Then go ahead and sign this, I said, thrusting divorce papers towards him. No, I don't want to break up. Who will take care of things at home if you're gone? He protested weakly. Staying together now is impossible, I stated firmly. I promise no more affairs, he screamed, his eyes bloodshot with tears, but his words didn't reach my heart. I'm not angry about the affair anymore, I replied calmly. What, so you're forgiving me? He asked hopefully. No, I replied firmly. What I'm angry about is you putting our daughter in danger. My husband fell silent, tears streaming down his face. And another thing, I continued, my voice steady, you don't have a place in anyone's life anymore. What do you mean? He asked, confusion evident in his voice. While you were gone, I told your parents, your coworkers, and everyone in your usual hangouts about what you've done. Everyone knows now, I explained. Hearing this, my husband buried his face in his hands, overwhelmed with despair. I don't even want to see your face, so make sure you fill this out, I said, handing him divorce papers. My husband looked up at me, his face a mess of tears and snot, resembling a child. I left him there and walked away. A month later, the news reached his company, and they revoked his promotion because of the agreement we had. He had to give up his assets with an additional $220,000 in damages and $400 a month in child support. He's barely making ends meet now, having to change jobs to a company with a terrible work environment just to earn a higher salary. He's working nonstop. Meanwhile, I've moved back to my parents' home with our daughter, doing my best as a single mom. Next year, my daughter will start preschool, and I'm looking forward to seeing her grow anew.